I have a few things I'm going to talk about with this presentation, but before I get started, I always like to do this because folks take copious notes and they try to scramble and write down URLs. You don't need to do any of that. You can just go right to this URL, bit.ly/Moz Startup Team. This presentation's on SlideShare. The only difference is the fonts don't quite look as nice on SlideShare because they don't have my custom font. So weirdly, maybe not weirdly, but as you scale a company, you will find that it's very hard. It's a very challenging, emotionally, physically draining process. And for those of you who've known me for a few years, you know that 4 years ago, if I stood on this stage, you wouldn't have seen any gray here or all this down here. It's when I go for a haircut, I basically look down and go, oh God, what happened to me? Thankfully, if I shave my beard, I still look like I'm 18, so I do have that going. And I think that most of this is because people issues are really challenging. They really are. So I like this quote from Avinash Kaushik, who works at Google now. He was at Intuit, works on web analytics. He says, you can coach the head, but you can't coach the heart. You can coach the head, but you can't coach the heart. And I think this has a ton to do with how we hire and build great startup teams. But unfortunately, a lot of us don't take this advice, and in fact, we do the complete wrong thing. So I've got a very simplistic chart version here, but the idea being that when you have performance and culture fit as your two axes, it's really, really easy to know what to do here, right? Someone's a high performer, they're a great cultural fit. Of course we're going to hire them or keep them on the team. The problem is when someone's a high performer and not a great cultural fit, we tend to make excuses. I've made excuses. I bet most of you have made excuses. You said, well, gosh, you know, we can't afford to get rid of this person. We'll work on trying to coach them through this. They've got some values issues. They don't quite fit with the culture here, but gosh, we got to do it. And the truth is that if you hire and keep those folks, your company culture and the performance of the rest of your team will be dragged down. And I've seen this time and time again. And if you get rid of these folks, the ones who are great culture fits, where you could coach the head and you don't need to coach the heart, you're going to lose some phenomenal people who could have been some of your best performers in the months and years ahead. By the way, when I say culture, I get really scared that people think I mean things like, we work hard, we play hard, which I think was stolen from a Simpsons episode. Do you guys remember? Roscoe, like the gay steel worker. Dad, why'd you bring me to a gay steel mill? It's not ping pong tables and beer in the fridge. It's not the inside jokes you have around the office. Right? It's not where you hang out after work. Oh yeah, that bar is totally part of our culture. No. And it's not a list of company values like we value hard work. We value top performance. We value top 10% stuck on the wall. What your culture really is just a few things. It's who you hire, keep, reward, promote, and why you do it. Who and why. And it's the criteria you define, hopefully you've defined and created, for having or earning influence at the company. And last, it's the values that you choose to prioritize when things are really tough. By really tough, I mean we have to choose between this value that we say we have and more revenue. We have to choose between this value we say we have and an investor who doesn't hold those values but wants to invest and can give us runway. That's when you know where the real values lie. That's what culture really is. And so when I say a cultural fit, I don't mean they don't go out to work, they don't go out to the bar after work with you and they don't play the same things that you play. It's true, if management is the only way up, if the only way to grow in your company or in any company is to have people reporting to you, all of us are fucked. That's what F star 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 D stands for. I don't know if you guys probably weren't aware before this, but you're welcome. I have lots of talents. At Moz, we have these 2 career progression tracks. This is not something that we instituted right from the start. This is something that was painfully learned over years of failing to do it right. And then figuring out like, oh my God, why haven't we been doing this? So at Moz, you can start on the individual contributor track somewhere around here, right? If you're, for example, a very senior engineer, you might even get hired up here, or a very senior marketer or senior product person, but you don't need people reporting to you. And in fact, you can move up this track, and at each of these levels, there's different responsibilities, different amounts of sort of influence. But the real difference is only what you're responsible for, whether it's actually doing the work or coaching and managing the people, doing the one-on-ones and the reviews and all the HR and organizational development. And I gotta be honest, there's a lot of people who don't love that stuff. I actually don't love that stuff. I love doing the work. That's why I'm up until 2 a.m. every night blogging and tweeting and writing stuff and making little weird graphics like this. That's what I love to do. Well, how is it that you can have influence if you're not a manager? This is something I hear from my own team, right? Like I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to tell you about some of this stuff, and what I don't want to try and fool you with is, oh, we get all this stuff right at Moz and you should do it this way. We don't get all this stuff right. Literally, we've hired people and had them come to us and say, how can I have influence? How can I be on this individual contributor track and have influence if I don't have people reporting to me, if I'm not a manager? And our COO and President Sarah Bird, I think, put it beautifully. She really likes to say, don't let your role define your influence. Let your influence define your role. I think this is incredibly powerful. If you get into a mindset where you think, just because I don't have X in my title doesn't mean that my contribution or thoughts to something aren't equally valid, you can do amazing things. One of our content editors, I emailed him yesterday and I said, hey, I think we really should be posting this thing right now because it's very important. And you know what he did? He argued back and he said, look, we've considered all these 3 things and I really want to post it on November 4th. I want to wait a couple of weeks. If you think it's super important, you know, you're the CEO, we'll do it, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And I backed off and said, Trevor, you're 100% right. You've considered all the options. He let his influence define his role, which was shot caller. Bravo to Trevor. If you're going to be building a great team, you need a great recruiting brand. And that means thinking about recruiting the same way we think about customer acquisition and marketing, right? There's this process, the first exposure that I might have to a company's brand, the first visit I have to their website, I might go back to their website, dive deeper into the company, I'll look at a job application, maybe I'll talk to someone on the phone for a phone screen, I'll have an in-person interview. This process is a lot like the e-commerce checkout process. And it better be the case that everyone who goes through here, whether they're a yes or a no, has a fantastic experience. Because if they don't, when they come out the bottom, and if you're doing a good job recruiting, you will have way more no's than yeses. Those people become these same people right up here. They are the friends and family and the recruiters and the people who our community talks to. How big is Seattle startup community? I mean, it's this big. It's this big. We all know each other. We are all 1 or 2 degrees away from each other on LinkedIn. You better have a fantastic brand when it comes to recruiting. Speaking of recruiting, I do want to tell a little bit of a quick story. So we tried something at Moz that I thought was a great idea. We had this $24,000 recruiting bonus. Basically, we'd pay an engineer, well, we'd pay someone who referred a software engineer to us $12,000, a $12,000 referral bonus, which is less than you would pay a recruiter, right? For those of you who use recruiters, they're very expensive. And we'll pay the engineer themselves a $12,000 signing bonus. So even that $24K less than paying a recruiter, we figured that's the place the money should go to. Let's try out this program. Weirdly, it didn't work that well. And I was sure that it would. It kind of attracted some of the wrong types of people, as Jean-Luc is showing you here. Like, we got a lot of people who were very interested in the dollars, who were very interested in the recruiting bonus, who were not particularly interested in the mission, the vision at Moz, the culture, right? They were sort of like, software for marketers, yeah, sure, I could build that. Yeah, tag fee, our core values at Moz, I could care about that, I guess. Not a great match. And worse, far worse, was it created this class. This is what you actually get if you type wire engineers into Google, by the way, and look at suggest. It's, and I think this is BS. Like, the engineers I work with are some of the best people in the world, and I love them to death, and they're, I think what makes them great is their humility. But it created a perception internally at the company that if you are not a software engineer, you're not worth that much. We don't care about you that much. You're not hard to recruit, so you're not important. And by the way, you also don't get the signing bonus. You can imagine the type of cultural problems that this creates, especially over time. So not a lot of fun. We turned off the program. Anthony, our CTO, basically came to the exec team meeting several weeks in a row and was like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off, stop it. And when the guy who desperately needs to hire engineers is telling you not to run a program like this, you listen. Only after the third time, but we had a lot of discussions. Speaking of, by the way, a lot of companies out there and a lot of belief in the startup world, especially if you read your Hacker Newses and your Silicon Valley diatribes, right? It's we only hire 10x engineers or 10x anything, and they don't exist. This is a myth created I don't know how by I don't know who. I can tell you right now that there are no 10x CEOs, there are no 10x marketers. There's I think a deep-seated need in the American psyche to believe in this hero, in the idea that one human being has these superpowers, right? And this is why things like comic books and things like CEO worship and I think CEO pay, right? And all these things are way out of bounds. What actually goes on, in my experience, is we think there's someone who produces at 10x level. That person, those people probably have a supportive environment around them. They have knowledge and experience that helps them. They have all the tools and structural support. And what they can actually accomplish is more like, well, maybe around 2.5, 3 times of what the average person in their role can do. But it doesn't sound nearly as sexy to say, we only hire 2.5x marketers. You what? So please be careful in your thinking about this. If you're going to build a great company, I think it is almost without exception, intentionally or unintentionally, leadership teams or individual leaders have a process. They can see a big picture vision all the way through to the end, and they can do a great job communicating that to their team, to their investors, to their customers. When you need to do this, I built a model that's been really helpful for me, and so I thought I'd share it here. This might not work perfectly for you, but it's been exceptional for me. It's essentially starting with this idea of core purpose. Why does this organization exist? Beyond money, why does this organization exist, right? So NASA exists, right, to further exploration of the universe, right? And Tesla exists to remove the world's energy dependency on fossil fuels, right? And then there's the strategic vision. How do we accomplish this thing? What's our methodology, right? And for NASA, that's individual things. So for example, they had their moon mission in the 1960s, right? We're going to try and explore the solar system. For Tesla, it was, I think we're going to power the shift from gas to electric vehicles. For Moz, for example, right, our core purpose is to help people do better marketing, and our strategic vision is to power the shift from paid to inbound marketing over the next decade. And then we build something called a BHAG, right, which is some way to measure whether we're doing the thing that we said we were going to do. Not measure this thing. You can't measure core purpose. Are we helping people do better marketing? Well, probably. Is NASA exploring the universe? Yeah, they're exploring it, but it's not very measurable. So a BHAG is that hyper-measurable one. NASA's moon mission, right? It was to put a man on the surface of the moon and return him safely to the Earth. And yes, it was gender biased. I urge you not to have gender biased BHAGs, but still very measurable. Did a dude stand on the moon? He did. Did he come back to the Earth? He did. Mission accomplished. And so Tesla has their BHAG around sort of number of vehicles they're going to sell, right? Moz has our BHAG around number of subscribers that we want to achieve. And I would urge you to get all of those things. And once you have them, then you get this. Then you can say, and here's the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that we're going to do in the next 12 or 18 months. And by the way, see how they map to these. And what's great is that everyone in the company can then take all the work that they do and go, gosh, I see how me fixing the CSS on our responsive design site helps accomplish this strategic initiative to reach a broader audience, which helps us achieve this vision, and we'll be able to measure it this way. That's really cool. It is so empowering as an individual contributor in a company and as a leader in a company to be able to look at anything that happens and say, got it. And then I like having this all surrounded with core values. So basically, you know, each of these is infused with the values that you've chosen for your company. I only have a couple more, but I'm a big believer just in all things that humanity might touch, in creating an expectation and then fulfilling that expectation, right? We're going to have a government-sponsored health exchange. You can go onto a website, you can buy insurance, it's going to launch on this day, and then when it doesn't, and it takes a couple of weeks to sort out the kinks, suddenly everyone is very disappointed. But if you say, hey, we're going to launch a website, it'll be buggy for a few weeks, and then it will work, and it will work on this date, and then here's all the dates. Oh, well, that expectation is exactly what you said was going to happen. Oh, there you go. It's really hard when you want to build process later in a company. And that sucks, because actually process is much harder to build early on because you don't know all the things that you don't know yet, and you haven't got all this sort of cadence and rhythm and culture and all that kind of stuff. It's very hard to do, but it is so worthwhile. If I were starting a company, another company today, there's a lot of process and structure that I think would help make that a much better and smoother ride than the bumpy, painful, pitfall-ridden world that Moz has been. And those painful lessons may, you know, depending on your correlation causation model, maybe you think that's why Moz has gotten to where it has, but I would make a lot of those changes. I think this is why, you know, for all of us first-time entrepreneurs who complain bitterly that investors only like to fund, you know, multiple-time CEOs, and it's so unfair how they can just go out and raise money with a song. And we have to, you know, achieve traction and do all these other things that, well, you know what? You learn a lot, man. You really learn a lot. I can see why that happens. It's easy to build process early. It's hard to build it later. Why is that? Because of inertia. Inertia makes it such that as you're going along in a company, people have an idea of how things should work, and they don't work that way. It's insanely frustrating. Even though when you hire people, and we've done this all along the way, hire people and you say, this is a startup, things are going to change a lot. It doesn't matter. Change is still hard. It's still wired in our DNA to hate change, to resist it with all of our might. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that is not me. I'm a startup person. I love change. You hate change. You are lying to yourself. You all hate change. I hate change. I just like it a little bit more than most people. You hate it less than most people. That's all we have. And so I have these 5 questions. I'm not actually going to run through them. If you want to check them out, go check them out online. Essentially 5 kinds of questions that I'd urge you to answer in your structure and process. So the last one, and this deserves a story as well, get some mechanism for organizational development, for team building that gives you feedback on a regular basis so you can really see deep into a company, especially as you grow beyond, say, 10 or 20 people and you're not interacting with every single person every day. It's super important to have these feedback mechanisms. So there's a company in Seattle started by David New. Does anybody here know or use Tiny Pulse? Sweet. Awesome. So we used Tiny Pulse, and initially we liked it a lot, and then we saw some challenges around it. The primary challenge being with the anonymity of feedback and how that mixed with our value of transparency. So essentially we had, on rare occasion, probably say 2 or 3 out of the 70 or 80 responses we'd get each week would be sort of anonymous sniping type things, and it was hard for us to know, should we push that to the team and share it, or how does that work, and is the power of anonymity make us more transparent or less transparent? You can read a little bit more on the presentation, but I'll just say we made a switch over to a company called 15.5. Does anybody use 15.5 here? This is actually my new favorite thing in the world. So it's super simple. 15 minutes every week to write a report that takes your manager 5 minutes to read. It actually is more like 5 and 2. It's super, super simple. These are the questions they ask. They sort of go, what did you do this week? What are you going to do next week? What challenges are you facing? What's going well in your role? What are you proud of? How are you feeling? How do you rate your performance? Having a how do you rate your performance every week next to what did you do this week means come review time, nobody's ever surprised. It's really awesome. I love this software. I would urge you to check it out if you get a chance. If you want to see any of the stuff that I've shared in this presentation, it's at bit.ly/Moz Startup Team. And with that, a huge thank you to John and everyone at GeekWire. It's been a pleasure to come here today. Thank you.